Hello my small fat adaptive family, and welcome back to the Keto Kitchen. It is week 9, which is the semi-finals of Great British Bake Off, and this week was Patisserie week. Before we get into Patisserie week, I just kind of want to explain what happened last week. Some of you may notice that there was a lack of week 8 of the Great British Bake Off. And firstly, I just want to thank all of you for your really kind words in the YouTube post that I put up saying that I wouldn't be partaking in pastry week. Basically, what happened was that I was making Rosie's shallot, aubergine and goat cheese tart tatin. So you cook like the filling first, put the pastry on top of it, and then you flip it. I was making like a caramelized sweetener to go on top of the vegetables. Well, when I was making this caramel, some sweetener at about 190 Celsius spat up and hit me in the lip here, and it was like this excruciatingly sharp pain. So what I did, I was mid-lift with the pan at that point, is I dropped it down, and as I dropped it down I caught my finger on hot metal, so I burnt my finger as well. I would have just carried on with my video after I'd done first aid, but after spending, you know, like 15 minutes with my finger under cold water and an ice pack attached to my lip, and then a few minutes, you know, just making sure it was all properly dried before I then spent a few more minutes putting Neosporin and a plaster on my finger, and then as well some time to just sit and moan about the pain I was in. It ended up being about 35 minutes before I got back into the kitchen. But at this point, the puff pastry I was attempting, that had last been seen in the freezer, cooling for what was meant to be a maximum of about 10 minutes, had been in the freezer for almost an hour and was rock solid. But I thought, no worries, right? And I got it out and I left it just on the side at room temperature, hoping that it would kind of go back to how it was supposed to be, right? So I came back to it when it was ready, and as soon as I started rolling it, it crumbled like sand. So I turned off the camera, finished the tart tatin because it was our dinner, which annoyingly it was fantastic, and I just gave myself a few days to recover. Now, of course, with the great positives of doing ketosis, my burns took about 2 days, if that, to fully heal. But at that point, it was already Friday, and whilst I could have re-recorded it, by the time I'd edited it and published it onto YouTube, it would have already been time for me to start getting ready for the next week, and it would have thrown my whole schedule out, and I thought I'd just leave pastry week. Let's get on with patisserie week. Patisseries are French or Belgian shops that specialise in pastries and sweets. But the thing with patisserie food is that it's often delicate and very precise. And of course, before we get into explaining what they did this week, make sure you check out Ginger's Great British Bake Off series. This week she made a custard tart. Last week she made a quiche Lorraine. And you can't go wrong with her mix, boom, done way of doing things. So as I said, make sure you go and check out her Keto-fine Great British Bake Off, because this was her idea in the first place. So this week, the signature was domed tartlets. They're tarts with like a domed mousse or jelly on top of them. The technical was Gâteau Saint-Honoré, a circular puff pastry topped with choux pastry and some special type of cream. And the showstopper was display cases that had something in the middle to represent something that basically was close to the baker's heart. So why am I doing what I've chosen to do today? The display cases were top of my list. It looked relatively simple, and it used isomalt, which is a sugar alcohol. Isomalt gets very, very hot, and I had literally just burnt myself on the last week. And, you know, I burnt myself on a sugar alcohol as well, so I just really wasn't in the mood to be messing around with hot sugar alcohols this week. And the technical went straight over my head. Puff and choux pastry, two things that are notoriously hard to make on keto. Yeah, no thank you. And that leaves the domed tartlets. So for week 9, the semi-final of the Great British Bake Off, I will be keto-fying Alice's Mocha and Hazelnut domed tartlets. This will consist of an almond flour base, a sort of coffee mousse as the dome, and a chocolate mirror glaze to top them. As always, a few notes before we start. Alice actually made mocha, hazelnut and orange. I've already done orange a few weeks in Bake Off, and I'm kind of bored of the flavour, so I just fancy doing just mocha. Secondly, she did like a espresso buttercream, and her tarts actually were a different shape to mine. None of that matters. We're going for taste and texture. We're not going for looking the exact same as hers did. And the third note as always, is I've never made this recipe before. I'm using this series to kind of challenge my ability to replicate a high carb recipe within a very, very short space of time. So if this fails, you get to see it all on camera. With that out of the way, let's get cooking. In terms of ingredients, you will need, for the coffee dome, 1 cup or 230 ml of double, also known as heavy, cream, half a tablespoon and half a teaspoon of instant coffee granules, 3 egg yolks, 4 tablespoons of sweetener, 2 tablespoons of salted butter, 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract, half a teaspoon of xanthan or guar gum, 1 teaspoon of gelatin powder, and a tablespoon of water at room temperature. For the tart, you will need 1.5 cups or 150 grams of almond flour, 1.7 ounces or 50 grams of butter that is soft, 2 tablespoons of sweetener, 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract, and 1 egg. For the mirror glaze, you will need 1 teaspoon of gelatin powder, 1.75 ounces or 50 ml of cold water, 1.75 ounces or 50 ml of double/heavy cream, half a cup of sweetener, 0.8 of an ounce or 24 grams of cocoa powder. Always check the carbs before buying cocoa powder because some companies just add sugar into them. And 3 tablespoons of chopped hazelnuts. And now the method. We start the method in a very bizarre place because you may have noticed that my whole attire is different, and that's because Bake Off finished about an hour and 45 minutes ago and I'm already starting it the evening it aired. Now the reason I'm doing this is because the first step that you need to do is a step that will take time to refrigerate, and I'd rather refrigerate it overnight. So what we're doing now is we're actually doing the domes. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my cream and I'm going to whack it in a saucepan on the stove on a low heat. What I'm also going to do is take my coffee granules and add them and give that a stir. And this is basically just going to get left for probably about 5 to 10 minutes, just so it heats up and so that those coffee granules actually dissolve. The other thing we're going to do at the same time as this is you're going to take your water, take your powdered gelatin, pour it in, don't even touch it or anything, literally just put that aside for 10 minutes. Now the other thing that we're going to do whilst that is sat just heating up is you're going to take your 3 egg yolks. Just going to pop this to the side a little bit, get my 3 egg yolks, take my sweetener, put the sweetener in the egg yolks, and I'm going to beat this until it's well combined and nice and sort of creamy and lighter in colour. Okay, so it's been about 10 minutes that our gelatin has been sat at the side and it's properly combined. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to quickly take this pan off the heat and I'm going to add the gelatin into it. Once my gelatin's added, I'm going to mix it really well just to combine it all in and make that gelatin go back into a liquid. So now what I'm going to do is with my egg yolk and sweetener mixture, I'm going to add in half of this hot cream mixture and beat it quickly. This is because I don't want to cook the egg. We then pour the egg mixture back into the saucepan. I'm going to whack that temperature up a little bit just to make sure it is on a sort of closer to medium heat. And I'm just going to continually stir this for about 4 to 5 minutes until it starts to thicken up. You know, you put your whisk in it and an imprint of your whisk will come out. Take it off of the heat, then add your butter and your vanilla extract and give that a good whisk. So look, this is what you're left with. It's this caramelly, coffee sort of coloured liquid that it isn't fully solidified obviously, but it's getting there already. It's quite thick. So this is going to get sat to the side and it's going to be left for about 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes, just to leave it to cool down a little bit because it's still very, very hot. What's going to happen off camera when this is ready is as follows. This is going to get poured evenly into my dome molds. Now my dome molds, you may have recognised because I use them in every single video, are actually my little glass bowls. These are a perfect sort of dome size. I'm intending to fill at least up to halfway, probably more looking at how much mixture I've got. Now, of course, because they're glass and they're not silicone, I'm going to give them all a spray with my coconut oil spray just to make sure they're greased. My greased dome molds will get put in the fridge overnight. If you are making these, it needs to be put in the fridge for at least 3 hours or until they are completely set. And then, while they're either in the fridge or you're ready to go and put them together, you move on to the next step, which is making the bit that goes above the dome and below the dome. I will give you back to Daytime Elliot to take you through all of that. Hello, it's Daytime Elliot again. We are going to move straight on to the tart base. For the tart base, I'm channeling my inner Ginger and I'm keeping things nice and simple with a mix boom done. So what I have here is I have my almond flour, and I'm going to add my sweetener, my vanilla extract, my soft butter, and my egg. So that's all of the tart ingredients, and I'm just going to mix that really well until it's nice and well combined. So now that I'm happy that my dough is nice and well combined, it's very moist and sticky like it should be. Initially I was going to roll it, but I think it's too sticky and it'll be a pain. So what I'm going to do is my dome tartlets, I've cut this template of the size of them. So I thought maybe if I basically grab a chunk, or alternatively, better, split this into 8 chunks. So what I'm going to do is get my prepared baking sheet ready. I'm going to take one of these lumps and kind of form it into a circle, or just make it more circular. Flatten it with my hand and shape it until it is evenly the size of my base. Like so. And then pop that on my prepared baking sheet and repeat for the remaining 7. Okay, so I've shaped my 8 tart bases. They're not 100% even, but they're pretty even for me, to be honest. They look like that. I'm really happy with them. And these are going to go in the oven for about, I'm going to say 8 to 12 minutes, but I'm kind of looking more at 10 minutes, and I'll know they're done when they're just starting to go sort of golden at the edges. Then what's going to happen is these are going to be taken out of the oven and set aside for about 15 minutes before we even start doing the next step, which is the mirror glaze, because I want to make sure these are 100% cool before we start assembling everything together. So our tart bases took about 11 minutes. Most of them took 10, but a couple of them I just left in there for an extra minute. And they're all sort of, as you can see, just sort of golden brown around the edges, and I'm just leaving them to cool whilst I get on with the glaze. For the glaze, what you're going to want to do is take your water and divide it so that you've got 25ml and 25ml. For one of the 25ml, you want to take your gelatin powder, pour it in, give it a real quick stir, and then set that aside while we do the rest. Then what you're going to do, in a small saucepan, I'm just using a milk pan, over a low medium heat, you want to add your sweetener, the other 25ml of water that doesn't have the gelatin in it, and then you want to add your cream and give that a stir. And then once you're happy that that's nice and well mixed, you're going to leave that to come to a simmer. Just trying to avoid that, but because I was turning the camera back on, I didn't. Open the back door, I'm sure that'll do the job. I hope smoke alarms don't go off. Okay, so once you're happy that your sweetener is all dissolved and your milk mixture, your cream mixture, sorry, is simmering, take it off the heat, add your gelatin mixture into it, and keep mixing until all of that gelatin has dissolved. Okay, once you're happy that that's fully dissolved, add in your cocoa powder and mix until not only is it fully combined, it's nice and creamy. Once you're happy that you can't whisk it anymore and that you've got as much of the lumps as you can out, you want to take a glass bowl. It is imperative that it is glass because metal will change the taste of this glaze. You want to get a sieve and you want to sieve your glaze into the glass bowl. This gets sat at the side for about 5 minutes because we want it to reach about 26 degrees Celsius before we pour it, which is like 80 Fahrenheit, which is like just below body temperature. So we're just going to sort of leave that for 5 minutes to do its thing. And in the meantime, we're going to take our domes out of their molds and have a look at how they've come out. So now we get to the point of taking the domes out of their molds. These have been in the fridge for about 14 hours now, and they're stuck in the molds. Coconut oil hasn't really made a difference because the coconut oil, of course, has solidified. So I'm going to start by giving it a go with a sort of butter knife, maybe see if I can work around those corners, pull them up a little bit. Oh, this is where this all goes wrong. No, please, not on the last leg. I just don't want to ruin the shape because this is the whole point of it, isn't it? Is this dome. And I'm just going to pop that there and do that arduous task for the next 7 of them. Okay, I got them all out in the end. You can definitely see as I go that I figured out the best way to do it. The best way is a quick round motion and then hook the knife under and just it out. Now the good thing about these is underneath is sort of moussey and creamy and soft, so if you really wanted to, you could spend time smoothing it out with your fingers or an offset spatula or something to make it look more like a dome, because mine aren't so much domes. They're a bit messy, but at the end of the day, they've held their shape. Even if the shape is blobby, they've held a shape. So these are going to get set to the side for a second. I'm going to use a wire rack to sit them on. I just need to put something underneath so I don't get chocolate everywhere. And then I'm going to transfer these. That they have solidified. It's just very weird because they feel like they're going to liquefy even though they shouldn't. If you've got to wait because your glaze is still a little bit too hot, you can have a feel of your tart bases to see if they're cool enough. They are, and if they are, put them on your serving platter, which today mine is just some greaseproof paper. So I'm happy that it's just under room temperature now, and all I'm going to do is take a spoon and just very gently trickle it, just allowing it to just droop down and cover the entirety of the dome. Then what I'm going to do is very, very gently and carefully put a knife underneath so that I can transport it to one of my bases. Then I'm just going to take a couple of my hazelnuts and just sprinkle all over that glaze. Let me repeat that for the remaining, and then we will come back for a taste test, a shot, macros, all the good stuff that we usually do. You know what time it is. It is time to taste test. I'm going to taste test the first one I made because they're starting to set, so let's go with the one that set the most while I made the others. They look awesome. They look like fancy Ferrero Rochers. Oh, I'm so happy. I mean, I know the base is a little bit too big, but I actually quite like it like that. Let's cut into this. Oh, lovely soft middle, lovely crunchy base. Let's just have a quick look at how that looks. As you can see, I've got my mocha, sort of, not mocha, sorry, my espresso in the middle. The base is got, you know, a nice snap to it. The base on its own just tastes like a very subtly sweetened tart base, you know, like you get with a Millionaire shortbread, that sort of base. The coffee middle is weird. Have you ever had mochi? Because it's got that same consistency as mochi, where it's kind of like pasty, but it's also a solid, and when you put it in your mouth it just liquidizes, it's like gone. It reminds me so much of mochi, that middle does. And then the actual chocolate glaze itself is a little bit sticky, very strong. When you combine the three, you get something that tastes like you've gone to a 5-star hotel and they've given it as a complimentary thing when you get there. I really like it. It's a bit weird. It is a bit weird, but I think that's because I don't often have stuff with coffee in it, like desserts and things I don't have with coffee in it. But I'm really happy with that. It's the kind of thing that I would make if I was having an important guest round, because it looks fancy, it feels fancy. I think I've smashed it. If you want to make something to really wow your guests into thinking that you're a patisserie chef, I'd say give this a go, because I've wowed myself. In terms of macronutrients, this makes 8 little tartlets, and per tart you are looking at 413 calories, 40 grams of fat, 9 grams of protein, and 3 net carbs. So again, I would say this is a fat bomb. It's a bit of a faff to make for a fat bomb, but it's stunning. It's really, really stunning. This is a kind of Christmas special, this one. Join me next week for the finals, where we will be... I have no idea what we'll be doing, because they haven't even given a hint of a potential category or anything. With that being said, that is all for this video. Leave a like if you found it interesting, insightful or helpful. Subscribe if you're inclined. Any questions, any comments, any queries, anything down below. Keep calm, keto on. Thanks for watching.